All right, C.M.R. kids, welcome to another Bible study with your teacher, Ralph. Today we're going to be learning a special story about a man named Mefiboset. But before we get started, get out your Bibles and remember, you only have 10 seconds.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Alright, C.M.R. kids, today's class can be found in 2 Samuel chapter 4, verse 4. Also in chapter 9, verse 1 through 7. Now, before we learn about Mephibosheth, I want to teach you about his dad, Jonathan, and the special friendship that he had with David.
This is Jonathan.
Hey! Who was the son of
King Saul and a warrior in Israel's army. This is David, who would later become the king of Israel. After David defeated a great giant, he was brought before King Saul and he met Jonathan. They immediately became friends. And Jonathan made a pact with David and showed him that by giving David his robe and weapons. From that time on, David was successful in all he did. And King Saul became jealous of David and very angry. Saul wanted his servants and Jonathan to get rid of David, but because Jonathan loved his friend David, he warned David of what his father was planning. Jonathan went to his father, King Saul, and talked him out of harming David. For a time, David was safe from King Saul's plans. But not long after, the king's jealousy and anger came back, and he tried to kill David. David got away, and his friend Jonathan came to help him. Jonathan tried again to talk his father out of hurting David. But now King Saul was convinced he needed David to be gone. Jonathan was angry and sad that his father would not let his friend go. And he knew that David would have to go into hiding and run from King Saul. Jonathan met David one last time, and the two cried and said their goodbyes. Jonathan told David to go in peace and that they had a special bond in God's name. Then David left and lived a life on the run from King Saul, and Jonathan returned to the town. Even though they were separated, the two were the best of friends and were an encouragement to one another.
Alright, C.M.R. kids, so we can see how special Jonathan and David's friendship was. Now, I don't know if you heard, but in the video, they mentioned that David and Jonathan made a pact, which is kind of like a promise. And the promise was that David would always show kindness to Jonathan's descendants, which means his family, his kids, his kids' kids, and so on. Now, you might be asking, what does this have to do with the man named Mephiboset? Well, Mephiboset was Jonathan's son. And when King Saul and Jonathan were at war, they died. And when this happened, fearing for his life, the Mephiboset's nurse grabbed him and they ran. Mephiboset's nurse ran, but unfortunately, she dropped him. And when she dropped him, he fell on his feet, making him lame. In other words, he couldn't walk right. As the years went by, Mephiboset grew up and became a man. Now, as you can see by the picture, he couldn't walk correctly. But something else was happening as the years passed. David had become King David. And King David had not forgotten the pact, the promise that he had made to Jonathan, that he would always show kindness to Jonathan's descendants. And who was part of that descendants? Mephiboset was part of Jonathan's bloodline. He was his son. So what did David do? He called for Mephibosheth. Now, I can only imagine what was going through Mephibosheth's mind. Would King David be angry? Would King David be happy? I can imagine Mephibosheth was very scared, and he didn't know what King David was calling him for. But David, remembering the promise that he made to Jonathan, that he would always take care of Jonathan's family, said to Mephibosheth, "Do not fear, for I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan your father's sake, and will restore you all the land of Saul your grandfather, and you shall eat bread at my table continually." So now Mephibosheth had a seat at the king's table. King David showed kindness even though Mephibosheth's grandfather, King Saul, was mean to David. King David never forgot how good Jonathan was. Just like that, we see how God shows us kindness. Because of what Jesus did in the cross, now you and me have a seat at the king's table. All right, C.M.R. kids, I hope you guys enjoyed today's lesson. I hope today's class motivates you to be kind to everyone, even when they don't deserve it. Just like King David was kind to Mephibosheth, and just how God is kind to us. All right, guys, have a great one. See you next time.